Hello and welcome to Letters Home, a story of a World War II B-17 pilot from Lowell, Michigan, in his own words. And he just so happens to be my grandpa. I'm your host, Annie Whitlock, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, my dad, Mitch McMahon, my aunt, Lori McMahon Summerfield, and Dale Croft from the Lowell Historical Museum.
In each episode of Letters Home, we're going to dive into letters written by my dad during his time in World War II that he sent to his parents, siblings, and friends back home in Lowell, Michigan. We'll be reading his own words and giving some context as to what was happening in the world and in Lowell at the time he wrote these.
In this episode, we learn about orderlies at Thurleigh, what raids in London were like, and whether or not Dad was a cat person.
Okay. Well, we're going to start with our corrections and additions. And we have a couple of additions this time, I think. Today we have our first one is from a listener, Mark Ritzma. And Mark just happens to be a relative. Mark's mother is Jo Ritzma, who was Bruce's niece. And Jo was Marion's daughter. So
there we go.
Just for y'all following along with the family tree. So, Lori, you have Mark's correction for us.
Yeah. Mark said he was listening to episode 26, and the Hudson Street address that we gave for Bern was 325. But that address is actually 525, where Mark lives now. Roger was on the 300 block, he said, and he and his wife Annette they live in the only McMahon house standing on Hudson Street left. And he also commented about the fish pond. He said they called it the fish pond up at their house. So, Frank and Lotta's house originally, and it was about 8 feet by 4 feet by 2 feet, and it had a stone with the name McMahon by it. And his dad gave the stone to Buzz, and it's at St. Mary's Cemetery next to Buzz's gravesite, which is pretty cool. I've got to go see it.
All right. Very cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, his mom, Jo, fell in the pool, fell in the fish pond. We don't know which one it was.
There we go.
Remember that?
Yeah, and she was
for the letters.
Yeah, she wasn't in any danger.
Apparently not. It was just a pond, little fish pond. Well, and then Dale has another addition for us about
cool.
the wasps that we learned about last week.
Yes, we talked about the wasps a couple episodes ago. I came across this. In June 1944, a small group of wasps learned to fly the new B-29 Super Fortress after experimental version of the plane had suffered catastrophic engine failures in 1943 and killed famed test pilot Edmund T. Allen. The plane's Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T engines were often called the wrong engines, causing many pilots not wanting to fly them. So Colonel Paul Tibbets, a renowned B-17 pilot, saw an opportunity to prove the B-29 could be flown. Women pilots were more willing to test the plane, and their success would make male pilots feel like cowards for avoiding it. He recruited Dora Doherty and Dorothea Dee Mormon to demo the pilots as pilots. Tibbets did not warn his new recruits of the engine fire problem. Instead, he trained them to take off without the standard power checks. On their test flight with the massive bomber, they calmly handled an engine fire and showed the B-29 could return to base even with significant damage. The Wasps then went on tour of the United States, logging around 50 flight hours as they showed up the hesitant male pilots until Major General Barney Giles brought the demonstrations to an abrupt halt, telling Tibbets the women were putting the big football players to shame. So, without the Wasp's willingness to take on the potentially deadly mission of the B-29, might have never made it to its operational service. And the operational service meant that Colonel Paul Tibbets was the pilot of the Enola Gay, who carried the hydrogen bombs to Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So, the B-29, and once again, two ladies supported our
Unsung
American
heroes.
forces with honor and pride.
Not willingly, you're so willingly tested. They were tricked.
Yeah, they were tricked. And they weren't treated, once again, there was that discrimination thing that we've talked about with the African Americans, the women, and the whole thing.
But
anyway.
women were calm, cool, under pressure.
Yeah.
That plane caught on fire. They were like, psh.
Yeah.
I
You
got
see
this.
them. Oh, a fire on engine 4. No big deal.
I
We'll
got
take
this.
care of it.
We'll figure this out. All right.
Awesome.
Those WASPs getting stuff done. That's for sure. All right. Well, remember, if any other listeners have a correction or if you find new information for us, please comment or message us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or just find any of us in the Meyer aisles. And we'll rectify it in a future episode.
Stop us at Meyer.
Absolutely. All right, so last week's episode, Bruce was proud to report that he was promoted to captain. Yay!
Yeah.
In our first letter this week, though, we realized the news may take a while to get back to Lowell. So this is from November 9th, 1943, in his own words.
Dear Mom and Dad, during the box mailing season, I believe that airmail is slower than V-mail. Therefore, I'll try to write you all V-mails until the season is over. Well, how does it seem to have a son who is a flight commander, not of a training field, but a whole combat squadron of forts? Ha ha. I'm just a bit egotistical. Yes? Seriously, though, I was very proud to be promoted to this position and also over pilots who have been there longer than I have. It was doubly important. My captaincy will come through in about 6 weeks, and then you'll have to change my name from lieutenant to captain. I wrote and told you about my receiving the Air Medal, but as of yet, no one has spoke of it in a letter. It's a beautiful medal, and I know you'll like it. You know, it's been almost a month now since I've received a letter from you, but because you use airmail, I expect it's because they are held up by such a huge Christmas mailings. Probably sometime this week I'll receive a whole bunch of your letters. I've been receiving a lot of Marg's letters of late, but she always uses V-mail, so that's why hers get through faster. But I don't mean for you to necessarily write V-mail. I like the letters in an envelope too. I'll get some sleep now and do this again tomorrow night. All my love, J. Bruce.
Yeah, the Ledger reported around this time that it is, in fact, Christmas mailing season. So if you wanted to send a box to someone overseas for Christmas, you had to do it in early November because that's how long it would take them to be able to get your goods by Christmas.
Oh.
We also have a picture of a Christmas card that Bruce sent to Frank and Lotta that says, "Season's greetings from Great Britain." And he sent it on November 9th, so I think the delay must go both ways, right? So we have that on the primary sources on the Historical Museum website, so you can see that. He also wrote a V-mail to his family on November 9th, in his own words.
Dear Mother and Dad, ho hum, I just returned from the snack bar. I say just returned. What I mean is that I returned about 6 o'clock, put some coals on my grate, and lay down for a short snooze. When I woke, it was 10, so I better get this letter finished, bank my fire, and turn in for the night. There's enough chill in the air these nights to make my room seem real cozy with a nice grate of coals glowing. Tonight I must address some screwy Xmas V-mails my orderly brought in while I was out today. I'm going to send one to each of the families and to the gang at the plant. I acquired a cat the other day, a beautiful black and tan. She has already caught a mouse. There are a few mice in the barracks, and the candy, etc., we have in the barracks brings them out of the field. Well, with wings, my feline around, they'll soon clear out. Just now she is lazily watching the shadows of my fire, flinching in the corner, probably contemplating where her next mouse is coming from. Well, good night. All my love and prayers, son J. Bruce.
He got a cat. Aw, he has a little pet named Wings. That's adorable. It's such a fitting name for a cat at an airfield. But I don't remember Grandpa being a big cat guy. Did you guys have a cat growing up? Grandpa had dogs, I remember, but
I had a cat growing up. I had
okay.
Chico, yep.
Chico.
Yeah, it was my cat, and it was
Cute.
Calico Cat.
Okay.
And you have a story.
Yeah, we won't talk about the Bridge Club disaster. That's a whole other podcast.
No, but you had one where Susan had talked about the cat that Dad. Well, I'm trying to think. Ironically,
oh, that's right.
ironic.
Yeah,
It was Al Ekman who, after Mom had passed, Al Ekman asked if anybody wanted one of the kitties in this litter, and I gave a cat to Dad, and Susan.
Well, Susan remembers the cat drinking from the bathroom sink. Dad would leave a little trickle going, and the cat would jump up there.
What was that cat's name? Do we remember? Because I vaguely remember this particular cat. Now that you mention it, but I would never.
Did you have a cat named Blackie? Did you have a cat? No, because it was black. I think it was black, and it might have had a little bit of white on it, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, mittens. I'm not trying to think. I can't
He had
We're just
he had
throwing out cat
out-
names.
I thought he had like a couple outdoor cats later on too. So
Yeah,
Okay.
I do.
Well,
he
maybe
kind of became a reluctant cat person.
and Wings is really
Great name,
won him
right?
over. I know. I also want to know what an orderly is. We talked about the orderlies bringing him as females. I know about orderlies in a hospital, I think, but what do they do? Dale, what can you tell us about orderlies in the Air Force?
An orderly for Bruce was an enlisted soldier assigned to perform various administrative and personal tasks for a commanding officer or group of officers. And since he was a captain, he got that privilege, which could include managing paperwork, maintaining living quarters, running errands, and generally assisting with day-to-day operations, similar to a personal assistant role in a civilian setting. They were not primarily involved in medical duties like in some other military bases. So it's basically like a maid.
Okay. So they would clean up
Or a
and
soldier, yeah.
bring the mail and
Yeah.
stuff. All right.
A Jeeves.
Well, that makes sense. At least that what Bruce is saying. That makes sense. Bringing him his mail and stuff. We have some pictures of order. He must have, he took some pictures of the orderlies. That we sit in his barracks, so they're on the primary sources as well, and we'll put those on Instagram too. All right, now it's time to get into our segment where we talk about what was going on in the world and in Lowell in November 1943. And so we're going to read a longer letter from Bruce from November 10th, 1943, that we'll pause here and there to kind of break up what he's talking about. So we'll start it off with Aunt Lori in his own words.
Wednesday afternoon. Dear Mom and Dad, it's just about 8 for you right now. That is 8 in the morning. It's 2 in the afternoon here, and I have a free day today, so I'm doing all the pleasant things first. After I write this, I'll have to, 1, put a few buttons on various pieces of my clothing because the top button on my pants was gone, and also because the zipper slips. I darn near lost my trousers yesterday. 2, make out my Form 1 log time, which is almost a month behind. 3, go down to the laundry and get my clean clothes. 4, censor a stack of letters for enlisted men. And by the time I finish all those things, it'll probably be supper time. I saw a clipping in today's Stars and Stripes, our daily American paper, so I clipped it out and I'm sending it along. It really struck me as funny, so maybe you'll get a kick out of it too. I'll also send the paper's heading so you can get an idea of what it looks like. 1 pound equals 2 cents in our money. I also receive the Yank each week, so I usually have plenty of reading for the time I have.
Yeah, Bruce mentions Stars and Stripes and Yank an awful lot. So Dale, do you know anything about these publications? What were these?
Well, these two publications were two totally different. Stars and Stripes was a newspaper, and the Yank was a weekly magazine.
Okay.
So the Stars and Stripes on November 9th, 1861, during the Civil War, soldiers of the 11th, 18th, and 29th Illinois Regiments set up camp in the Missouri city of Bloomfield. Finding the local newspaper's office empty, they decided to print a newspaper about their activities. They called it the Stars and Stripes.
Oh, from the Civil War?
Yeah,
That goes
by
back
tradition.
that far? Oh.
Tradition now holds that this is the original story for the newspaper and the Stars and Stripes. The first official military publication of the Stars and Stripes was published in Paris during World War I for the American Expeditionary Force, the AEF. In World War II, the Stars and Stripes was an 8-page weekly newspaper, which at its peak reached 526,000 readers. It was published in many editions for troops in Europe, Africa, and the Pacific. The newspaper reported on the war, activities of U.S. troops, and news from home. Soldiers look forward to reading Bill Malden's popular upfront cartoons, from which he returned home to a successful career as an editorial cartoonist and 2-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize, an American journalist and war correspondent, which we all know. I didn't know about Bill Malden, but Ernie Pyle, who regularly published in the Stars and Stripes before he was killed by a Japanese machine gunner during the Battle of Okinawa. So Stars and Stripes was a newspaper.
Okay.
The Yank was an Army Weekly magazine published by the United States. It was written by enlisted soldiers for service members stationed overseas. The first issue was published on June 17th, 1942. It was the most widely read magazine in the history of the U.S. military. It was published in 17 countries and had a worldwide circulation of more than 2.6 million readers. It featured a weekly pinup photograph
of course.
and was sold for 5 cents. It could only be sold to military personnel. For its many readers, Yank was a substitute for family, friends, or a sweetheart back home. In addition to articles relating to the grim realities of war, it touched on current events, history, sports, entertainment, and sex, energizing soldiers and reminding them of the people, places, and values for which they were fighting. The most popular department was Mail Call, a letter section in which GIs could blow off steam, air issues, and seek frank answers to pressing questions. No topic was too big or too small. Scores of the Americans in this service wrote in and or scanned the section for answers to their concerns, sympathizing with their brothers in arms worldwide. It created an extraordinary record of American life and helped to maintain black morale by openly acknowledging the racial prejudice that was a problem. For example, the magazine April 28, 1944 issue included a letter from a black corporal, Rupert Trimmingham, complaining that white German prisoners of war were being treated with more respect than black American soldiers. The reaction to the letter was strong and immediate. In a follow-up letter, Trimmingham said that he had received 287 letters, 183 from whites supporting his position. The editors reported that Yank had received a great number of comments from GIers, almost of whom were outraged by the treatment given to the corporal. So, once again, here's the discrimination hymn. Soldiers look forward to G.I. Joe and the Family Circus cartoons, as well as the more than 100 actresses that appeared as one of the weekly pinups. You know, when it came to elevating soldiers' spirits, no section came close to Sergeant George Baker's beloved comic strips, which Bruce loved, The Sad Sack.
Is that the one with like the hillbillies?
Yeah, he had a lot of those.
Yeah, okay, yeah. He saved those.
Yank created a unique record of American fighting men's role in the World War II. The magazine also worked to address the anticipated moral issues that come with recruiting an army of citizens, aiming to humor GIs when they were discouraged or sad, provide an outlet for their frustrations, and inspire them to push through the hell of war, knowing they were not alone. It was not just the features written by the correspondents that reflected the story of American spirit and grit. The story of Yank itself, its origins, its mission, and above all else, its writers, artists, and photographers became one of the World War II's enduring tales. The last issue was published on December 28, 1945.
Okay,
So
that
just
was
existed for the war.
So,
That's cool.
Stars and Stripes, newspaper, Yank magazine.
All right. Well, Bruce read both, apparently. He has some reading time on his hands. Okay, so let's keep this letter going in his own words.
As I write this, Wings, my cat, is lying on my bed, giving herself a good cleaning. She is honestly the cleanest cat I've ever seen, and I have a great deal of fun with her. All I have to do is say Wings, and she'll jump into my lap. Quite often when I'm writing, she'll jump onto this desk and walk all over my stationery. As you know, I've never cared too much for cats, but she seems different than most of them. Before I come home, I'm going to get a Celium, the white Scotties. An English acquaintance of mine told me he could get me one, and while he'll make a nice pet for one of the families if Colonel is still around. This sounds like I've changed my affection for the old boy. I haven't, and I hope that I'll be able to take him out just once more before he gets too old. Did I tell you that I acquired an English bicycle with the gear shift on it? When I say acquire, I mean for £7, but that's only $28, and if you could buy them at home, they'd cost you twice that much. It comes in quite handy around here because distances around the field are great, and the walking is usually plenty sloppy. I'd like to be able to bring it home when this is over, but the transportations would probably be impossible.
Well, I guess we have the answer about whether or not Grandpa liked cats. He liked Wings quite a bit. But this bike thing is what, Aunt Lori, you were talking about this, I feel like a couple episodes ago, how they would ride bikes around because of how far apart everything is. Yeah, so apparently that's accurate. And he bought one and rode around. We have pictures of him on his bike that we'll also post there. So lots of pictures from this particular time period, too. I do think it's funny that he is not sure he's going to bring the bike home, but the dog that he's going to get over in England.
I know.
No problem. I don't understand that, but that's okay. And I don't think he did, right? Like, I don't think he did ever bring home one of those white Scotty dogs.
No.
So
No.
I feel like you guys would probably remember that. All right, so let's finish this letter in his own words.
I was in London a short while ago. Remember, exact dates are censored where I'm concerned. And they had a raid. Probably your papers tell you of these raids, but it really is something to be a witness to one. First of all, there's the eerie sounding sirens, which always did give me chills. Then the searchlights start penciling the sky. After a while, you can hear the engines overhead, and then the AA guns open up. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish between these shells exploding and bombs dropping. And if you have your head poked out of some doorway, you're quite liable to shell fragments which make a continued rain until the enemy leaves. But the raids nowadays are more or less nuisance raids, English Stoic character calls them, as an empty block remains of the Blitz, that is. If you're sitting in a club nowadays, here's the usual conversation during a raid. The orchestra is playing like Goodman, so maybe the fellow at the next table will inquire, "Did you hear a bomb drop?" "No, I don't think so." "Is there a raid on?" "Well, there must be because I heard the anti-aircraft open up as we came in." "Say, how about changing partners this dance?" "Okay, cheerio." No more concern is made of a raid than this, although the air raid wardens, firemen, etc., they keep ever vigilant and are doing the same wonderful job today as they did 2 years ago. When you read of the losses, raids, etc., over here, please try not to worry. Remember, you are everything I hold dear in this world, and I don't want you ill from worry. You've got to be in good shape for my return. My prayers are always for you, even when on a raid, although I might sneak in a couple for me now and then. Again, your loving and ever grateful son, J. Bruce.
See, this is a lot like what you were saying last week about how the people would, they were so used to raids at this point in London. They just sort of move under and
under a storefront, and just like, I thought, that's such a different lifestyle. Can you imagine us? That's so.
Yeah.
And again, there's so many war-torn areas now that people are used to that, and we just don't know what that is in our country, which is good.
Yeah, and like even England, this is 1943, and the U.S. had been in the war for like 2 years at this point, but Britain had been in the war for 4, so like twice as long. So if you remember, like the war started before we got into it over in Europe, so in 1939. So like they have been used to it, I believe, more than maybe Bruce would be like thinking they would be.
Good reminder.
Yeah, so they've been in it a lot longer. So now, speaking of air raids and missions here, it's now time for our segment where we reveal information we know about Bruce's flight missions. So if you remember, for this information, we have to consult flight records and mission diaries from the historical website of the 306 Bomb Group and all of its squadrons, because Bruce cannot talk very specifically about raids in his letters at all, because that's censored. So we have to do some detective work. And we found on November 5th, 1943, Bruce flew a mission to Gelsenkirchen, Germany, practicing our German again. And this description is from the combat diary.
Gelsenkirchen. The squadron, led by Cookie, Captain L.G. Cook, took the group into the Ruhr Flak and brought it all out again. Though our veterans thought Happy Valley had less guns than before, what they did throw up played merrily around the squadron, particularly Lieutenant William Nally's plane, where a piece hit his number 1 supercharger and knocked it into number 2 supercharger. Enemy fighters were again thrown off by our P-47s, which, having seen the P-38s at Wilhelmshaven, endeavored to snuggle up close, if not quite as close to our ships as the P-38s do. While the crews dropped on PFF, the target could be seen through the haze. Cookie, assisted by co-pilot Coyle Logue, earned the gratitude of the group by his fine evasive action over the target, turning sharply off and out of the flak. Lieutenants James T. Harrison and Lieutenant Alfred Simon were in the lead team, and the other crews were led by Lieutenants Joseph Gay, William Katz, J. Bruce McMahon, and William Nally.
Wow, so it seemed fairly uneventful for Bruce, but maybe not, as he was watching all of this happen as his, the other planes are darting in and out of flak and, bumping into things. So this is interesting. He seemed to be a fairly easy mission. But Gelsenkirchen actually had a big oil refinery there. So it was a place that was bombed quite frequently during the war to kind of hopefully cut off war production for Germany. So we're going to read a snippet of a letter that Bruce wrote to his parents that reveals some very rare specifics about his raids. But even then, not too much, just a little bit, in his own words.
As you know, many of the letters I write are written after a raid. That is, after I clean up, eat, and change my clothes. However, I can never tell you where these raids take place because my address, 368th or 306th group, would let you and the enemy know what groups and squadrons took part in the particular raids. This is why you'll just have to wait to hear about them firsthand. In your letter, you spoke of Norm's mother calling you. Well, you see, I couldn't mention this before because the official notice must be sent to his mother first. I also can't tell you on what raid it happened, nor any of the circumstances surrounding the battle. Enough to know at present is that I came back safely without a scratch. Time and events take place so swiftly over here that seems ages ago. In actual happenings, it is ages ago.
Yeah, so if our listeners remember, Bruce's bombardier Norm went down with a plane when he was flying with another pilot on that Bremen raid back in the early October during Black Week. And this is the first time Bruce has mentioned anything at all in his letters that I remember about anything that happened to a crew member, because even then it seems like he's only mentioning it because Norm's mother called Lotta and Frank.
Yeah.
Right? So it seems like he probably wasn't going to say anything at all until Lotta got a phone call.
Yeah.
So can you imagine, you're Lotta and Frank thinking, everything's just fine. Then you get this phone call that says one of Bruce's crew members is missing in action. So you're like, whoa, what happened?
Yeah.
That's insane. Yeah. But I'm interested, how did Norm's mother even get Lotta and Frank's number, I wonder? I don't know, how would they get connected? We don't know the answer.
Unless Norm's, when you said that before, I kept thinking, would Norm maybe have written home could he have written who his captain was? He probably could have written who his captain was, and maybe they did some. Maybe they were researchers
like you. Dialed O for operator and asked.
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
You don't remember those days.
No. Yeah. No, I know. Not really. I don't know how I would get their number, but yeah, that's interesting. And so I feel like, he would have probably kept that to himself. I'm guessing he would have not mentioned that if they had not gotten this phone call, because he's telling them I would have told you, but they got to let Norm's family know first.
Right.
Sure. I don't think he would have told them.
Well, would Lotta and Frank have assumed that because Norm was lost, that Dad was also lost?
I think so, yeah. He might have. I think I would have, probably.
Well, if Norm's mother called and said, he's your James Bruce is the captain, and I've flown, maybe.
No, we don't know.
Yeah,
I would. I'd go right to that. I would, if I were a mom of a pilot, I'd go right to that. That's what I would think, But at the time that Bruce wrote this letter to his parents, he didn't actually know what had happened to Norm yet. So all they knew at that point was that Norm's plane went down, and that's it. We didn't know. I think he saw the chute, maybe.
He saw the parachutes. He saw the parachutes.
So we don't know. But he didn't know what happened to him after that. But in his scrapbook that he kept, he mentions that he later learned that Norm was in the Stalag 3 prison as a POW. So we mentioned that a while ago. It's that same prison camp that's featured in Masters of the Air and The Great Escape movie. So Norm was there. So he does know this later, that he was in a prison camp. So I don't know how I don't know how he gets that information either. How does that get back to them? But that's a whole other thing. But thanks to the 306 Bomb Group website, I tried to do some searching for Norm just to see what did happen to him. And we learned that, I learned that he did survive the war. So he made it out of the prison camp. I don't know if he and Bruce ever saw each other again, but they did. He did make it out. He did die in 1986, though, in Chicago, Illinois, and he had a son, Norm III, who was a Vietnam vet. So I learned all this from that historical website.
That's great.
They kept track of who, veterans, and then later the veterans would pass away, and they'd publish an obituary. Yeah. For them and stuff. So that was kind of neat. So, that's how I found Norm. I'm assuming it's the same Norm Sansom.
Yeah, well, they had quite a prolific newsletter. I mean, Dad would get the newsletter. Yeah, so.
Yeah, they really did. So Norm made it out eventually. But yeah, I don't know if they ever saw each other again, but where he had his number, they had Loud and Frank's number.
Before we go on, I wanted to say something too, because I think I told you guys, I don't remember if I've mentioned it in the podcast or not, about how Dad, when he went up and he was watching, did we say that? I think I have said this, where he was, because he wasn't a co-pilot for very long, but that he was smiling. And he was smiling when they were
when he was
getting shot at. Yeah. And, the pilot had said, what's that? Get that smile off your face. And Dad said he had just never seen flying like this before. He was just so, enthralled with all the flying and the techniques and things. So you think that there's a lot of this that, thinking about watching this last raid, I'm thinking, oh, my goodness.
Yeah. He's certainly beefing up his flying skills.
Yeah, I remember him saying something similar.
Yeah.
Just being enthralled and not having time to even think about being scared. Just,
right. Because it's not the percent, that's not our perspective.
It had to be surreal.
Oh, sure.
In a lot of ways.
That's amazing. Well, we're going to finish today with another excerpt of a letter from Friday, November 12th. Apparently, Bruce has already received some holiday mail. Some of the boxes have already gotten to him. So, in his own words.
Your box arrived yesterday, and I couldn't ask for anything more than you sent. Candy is the most welcome gift over here. Margaret sent a box, and it has some of the swellest fruit cookies in it. She said she baked them herself. All I have to say is that she's a swell cook. Bern and Helen's box came yesterday also, and it was full of the freshest popcorn. I think I wrote to them last night about it. Isn't it terrible to have such a memory that I can't remember for sure or not? Also, those boxes Bern made kept everything so fresh, and they'll be handy to keep things in. The mice can't stand a chance now with the wooden boxes and Wings here keeping their eyes open.
He loves Wings.
He likes a good mouser. He always liked a good mouser.
Well, yeah, he's going to provide. The cat's providing a service here in addition to being fun to play with. So Grandma Maggie made good fruit cookies. I don't think I've ever had one of her fruit cookies.
She never wasted any dough. There was never any dough, any pie crust. You would never waste any dough. You would always make tarts, or you'd make something from that dough if there was anything left over. Yeah, that's all I remember about the fruit. Little, pinch it, little things.
All right, so you never had any of her fruit cookies?
No, I had like
a
Lori's
tart.
Yeah,
okay.
And I remember figs in dough.
Yep, me too.
Well, I guess that's a fruit.
And dates.
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess that counts. That's not really what I was thinking, but I guess that counts. Yeah, I remember her molasses cookies for sure.
Yep. Yeah.
I have her recipe for molasses cookies.
Yeah.
And did she used to make like a meringue cookie too or something? I think the first
meringues.
time I ever had meringue was hers.
Oh, yeah, they're my favorite.
I don't even know if I had them since, but
meringues, yeah, really good. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, she was a good cook, I suppose.
Baker.
I don't remember as much. I say I suppose because I don't have as many memories of what she would make or bake as probably you guys do. But
Meringue with a scoop of ice cream and a little chocolate syrup. Ooh.
yeah, there you go. I do remember meringue for sure. And I have her molasses cookies recipe. I'll make some.
Yeah. Oh, you have. They're good. They're awesome.
Her recipe and her
I
handwriting.
ate the whole batch you sent.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think I talked about this before too. She made the lemon bars. I also have a recipe for lemon bars. I don't think I ever had any that she made, but I found her recipe and recreated those. So, and it did say that it's included. You needed to include pepper, which I'm pretty sure was wrong. Pretty sure that was supposed to be salt. So.
I think her lemon bars were in the Grand Rapids Press. I have a picture of her.
Yes,
in
I
the
think
Grand
that's where
Rapids
I
Press.
got that from. Yeah, that must be where I got that from too. Yeah. All right. Well, Bruce enjoyed the fruit cookies. That's for sure. Thank you for listening to Letters Home. We hope you continue to listen as we go through Bruce's story. You can listen to Letters Home on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the Lowell Historical Museum website and YouTube channels. New episodes drop every Thursday. The Lowell Historical Museum has digitized versions of Bruce's letters, so you can read them in full, along with primary sources for most of the people, places, and events we've talked about here today, plus more. You can also follow the Lowell Historical Museum on Facebook and the Letters Home podcast on Instagram at Letters Home Lowell. Thank you to Roger McNaughton for our podcast music and to WRWW 92.3 FM for letting us record in their studio at Lowell High School every week. Tune in or stream WRWW at lowellradio.org. See you next time.